Welcome back to the MOOC course on qualitative research methods. My name is Aradhana Malik and I've been helping you with this course, and we are coming to the end of this course. These are the last few lectures now. So we've discussed a whole bunch of things, and I've seen some feedback, and we've gone through a lot of things in this course. Now what we are going to do today is we are going to talk about the implications of whatever we have studied, the applications of what we have studied to the social world. So let's move on with it. Today we are going to talk about, in this lecture we will try and understand how social programs can be understood through qualitative evaluation, and how qualitative research applies to the evaluation of social programs. It's very, very important in this day and age, especially in our country. It is such an important thing. The government is investing heavily in the development of India. The government is investing heavily in the alleviation of the daily life situations of the rural country, especially people living in rural areas, through a whole lot of social programs. So it will be helpful for us to understand how whatever we have studied till now applies to understanding those social programs, to evaluating them, to making them better, and to making them more fruitful. Okay, what do social program evaluators do? Social program evaluators aim to inform and improve services, programs, policies, and public conversations at hand. Social program evaluators try and they engage in participatory action research. We've talked about participatory action research. They go into the field, they find out what is required, they do what is required, they get feedback from the field, they bring it back, and then discuss amongst themselves, get the opinion of experts, analyze whatever they have seen and heard and observed, and then they improve on their current processes, and they go back and implement these changes, these improvements in the field, in an attempt to make their work better, in an attempt to see to improve the way social programs are progressing. So that is what they do. Okay, the context of program evaluation. These are contexts about contested social policies and programs, about how and by whom resources are allocated, and about competing civic values both in the global arena and the local community. These are the contexts where it is difficult to hold somebody accountable. These are contexts in which a very fine line has to be drawn between two competing paradigms. For example, one needs to start something new, one needs to introduce new policies and programs, but critics say that till you have improved, till you have reached a certain level of implementation with the programs that are currently going on, why should you invest anything into something new? And the government says, well, we can't really, we are trying to improve whatever we have going on, but it is also important to look forward. It is also important to invest part of what we have in something new, and then maybe the fruits of our labor from investing in something new can later be fed into improving what is already ongoing, which will take up a lot of time and energy. So that is where these are competing values. Should I just sit and use all my resources to improve something that is already going on? For example, healthcare. Now the government has set up these hospitals everywhere, the whole country's network with these healthcare facilities. And in many places, unfortunately, in rural areas, we don't have staff, or we are understaffed. I shouldn't say we don't have staff. We are understaffed in some areas. In some areas we have equipment that people don't know how to use. In some areas, the hospitals are located in areas which are difficult for people to reach. Now these are real problems. The government did whatever it could. They assessed the situation and they gave us these facilities. now they are also trying to set up newer hospitals in areas that were not reachable earlier. They are also trying to add to the facilities that are already there in the current hospitals. And maybe some people would say, well, why don't you first improve the infrastructure you have? Why don't you first fully staff these hospitals instead of setting up new hospitals? And we say, yes, that is a very valid concern, but we also need to look forward. We need to have super specialty hospitals in rural areas, in smaller areas, in hard to reach areas. We also, at the same time, we also need to improve the primary health care facilities within the country. So we have to divide things. We can't just focus on one and completely neglect the other, and that is precisely what we are talking about in this slide. We are talking about competing policies and programs, competing civic values. Who decides what to allocate, how much to allocate, who decides on what basis we will allocate a certain proportion to, or how do we make these decisions? It's not who decides, but it's how these decisions are made, and that is what social program evaluators facilitate. Okay, the factors influencing the evaluation of social programs, the first one is political power. That is number one. Policy making, and within political power we have policy making, we have implementation, we have value attributed to the voice of the beneficiaries, which means that the people who are making these policies have the power in their hands. They are the ones who are equipped, who are empowered, who are knowledgeable, or who have the know-how to develop these policies. They have the information that they require to make these policies. Then they are also the ones, that there are people who are equipped, who are empowered to implement these programs. So they are the ones who have the power. Then the value attributed to the voice of the beneficiaries, that also adds to the political power that ultimately influences how social programs are evaluated. After all, people who we are doing all this for should also tell us, or should also be heard, to find out whether what we are doing is of use to them or not. So it is very, very important to give a voice to the beneficiaries. It is also very important to find out what people who are actually being affected by these programs feel. Excuse me. Credibility and perceived role of evaluators. Are the evaluators qualified? Are they what are they doing as evaluators? Are they assessing for the sake of assessing only and writing reports and being done with it, or are they going to do something about it? So that also affects how social programs are evaluated, and also how these programs are the evaluation that comes from these programs is incorporated into further program implementation. Okay. Involvement of evaluators in the community. Now we are talking about participatory action research. If the evaluators are actually participants in the community, the evaluation will be much richer, because they are also stakeholders in the program implementation. They are also being affected by the program implementation. Either they are being affected as beneficiaries, or they are being affected as the implementers, or they are being affected as observers, but they are being affected. So it just depends on how much of stake they have in the actual program. Then the stakeholder interests. What do people want? Are we giving them what they want? The power stakeholders have over the implementation of social programs. Many times stakeholders actually convey, they have the voice of, or they have the power to let the implementers and policymakers know what they want, and their voice is really heard. So all of this influences how social programs are evaluated. If I have a stake in the program, then I will evaluate it very differently, as opposed to if I'm just supposed to write a report and submit it to the government without really feeling the pinch or getting the benefit from that social program. So I'm not saying everybody does it, but my perspective will be different. If emotions are involved, I will, and it could go the other way also. If my emotions are very heightened with the program evaluation, then I may not be able to write an objective report. I may not be able to write a balanced report. So the way the program is evaluated depends on a lot of things: who we are, whether we are trained, whether we are able to do it or not. Okay. How does qualitative program evaluation fit into all this? Some contemporary genres of program evaluation approaches are post-positivism, utilitarian pragmatism, interpretivism and constructivism, and critical social sciences. Let us look at each one of these. Post-positivism is oriented around the interests of policymakers and funders. Post-positivism looks at what policymakers and funders want. It involves causal questions about the degree to which a program has attained desired outcomes while retaining cost efficiency compared to its critical competitors. So post-positivism involves the degree to which or how the outcomes have influenced the questions, or whether there is a cause and effect relationship between the questions that were asked and the outcome that has been produced. It addresses recurrent demands for accountability in social expenditures. So when we spend so much of money, when we evaluate programs from a post-positivist point of view, we try to find out whether the money that we used for these programs was actually used properly or not. It prefers scientific logic because of its perceived objectivity, replicability and verifiability. Okay, so it is focused around logical explanations of how things were done, whether they were done right or wrong. The evaluation is very, very logical in this sense, and the evaluation is replicable and verifiable. Okay. The primary values that are promoted are efficiency, accountability, cost effectiveness and policy enlightenment. The policies need to be such that, according to, if we evaluate programs and policies from a post-positivist point of view, we want the policies to be ironclad, we want them to be very systematic, very logical, and we want to be able to very clearly see a cause and effect relationship. The key audiences in this case are the people who we write these evaluations are the high-level policy and decision makers, the funders and the social science community, because their further research depends on such evaluations. Preferred methods are quantitative: experiments and quasi-experiments, surveys, causal modeling, cost-benefit analysis, plus minus, one thing leading to another. So the preferred method of evaluating social programs from the post-positivist point of view is quantitative. If I see A, if A plus B should be equal to C, it cannot be C and X and Z at the same time. That is what we are trying to find out from this. Typical evaluation questions are intended outcomes attained and attributable to the program. Did we get what we invested into it or not? Is this program the most efficient alternative, or are there better alternatives in which the outcome to input ratio is higher? Okay. Utilitarian pragmatism addresses the issues that are not transferred well to real life social contexts. It refocuses the attention on the needs of the decision makers, especially the practical needs of on-site decision makers, for program information useful for management decisions. When we talk about utilitarian pragmatism, we are talking about the practical application of things, which may not be a plus-minus game. Sometimes the practical application of things requires or inherently builds waste into it. So the cost-benefit relationship may not be very sound, but it is implemented and the effects are much more visible later. Okay. Primary values that are promoted are utility, practicality and managerial effectiveness. Even if the cost-benefit ratio is not very high, as long as the people who are benefiting from it feel good about it, it is good. As long as the people who are stakeholders in the process feel that it is of use to them, it is all right. Now the key audiences here are mid-level program managers and on-site administrators. A friend of mine once told me that when you implement a program, when you do something, you must account for, or you must build at least 10 to 20% wastage in that program. That is what she told me. This is somebody who has been doing a lot of social program work. This is somebody who has been out in the field for a long time, and she said everything doesn't happen on plus minus. If you spend 5 hours in the field, you may need to spend 2 out of those 5 hours just building rapport with people. It's not about giving them something, letting them do something, going into the field, building a road and coming out. Excuse me. You may need to build a rapport with the people in the community. You may need to just sit, put your things aside, sit and talk to the people in the community. I'll give you a personal example at this point. Many years ago, in the year 2001, in the summer, I went to Romania for a 3-week internship at an orphanage with a bunch of other students. And we were a group of students, and we went to an orphanage, and we went with our lofty plans, and this was one of the very few orphanages that had opened its doors to foreigners. So it was nice of them. This was in a place called Iași, IASI, spelled as Iasi, pronounced as Iași. This is in Romania. So we went there, and this was such an enlightening experience as far as the program implementation is concerned. We went with our plans. We said, okay, we are going to spend 8 hours there. We'll spend 4 hours in the morning, go for lunch for an hour, go back, spend 4 more hours. Guess what? We went there, we showed our plans to the administrator, and she said, close your books. We said, what? She said, yeah, close your books. We do not need you, outsiders, students, one from India, one from France, one from England, one from Japan, coming and telling us. There was one lady from Sweden. So, she said, we don't want you people coming and telling us how we need to do our work better. Do you know what we are facing? We said, no. She said, what we need you to do is, we need you to spend time with these children. This was an orphanage. The caretakers were overworked. So she said, you spend time with the children, and we will tell you what to do, and you help us with what we are doing, and that will be enough service for us. And we said, okay. So initially, some of us who had not done this, we were confused. We said, what? We are here to do something substantial. We have to submit a report. And she said, you write whatever you want in the report, but we need you to sit and spend time with children. So there were 6 of us students, and we had 2 host students. Each of us adopted 1 to 2 kids, and all we did was play with these children. These children needed our time. They needed hands-on affection. Some of the children were abandoned, some of them were orphans. They did not have family, they did not have people to love them. So we went, we gave them time, we gave them affection, and in the process, those of us who knew how to help disabled children, we helped them. There was a boy who couldn't walk properly. He had polio, and then it's been so long, this example just came to mind. So we helped this child. We would just do his exercises with him the whole day. So that was what was really required. Now that was utilitarian pragmatism, a social program with the utility for the beneficiaries really got our time, and we gave children time so the workers in the orphanage could do what they had been hired for. They were understaffed and overworked, so we gave them some respite. With the result, the overall performance of that orphanage improved. Why? Because they were doing their work. We were just helping take away the time, or we were just filling in the time that they wanted to spend with the children that they could not. That was not part of their job description. So that is how our time was very fruitfully utilized. This is what this means. The cost benefit analysis would have yielded probably a negative ratio. But here, the benefit that the orphanage got out of our work was tremendous. We spent 3 weeks there. It was amazing for everybody. Okay. Primary values promoted are utility, practicality, managerial effectiveness. The key audiences are excuse me, mid-level program managers and on-site administrators. The preferred methods are eclectic, mixed, structured and unstructured surveys, interviews, observations, document analyses, and panel reviews. The typical evaluation questions are: which program components work well and which need improvement? How effective is the program with respect to the organization's goals and mission? Who likes the program? Now, the example that I just gave you, which program components work? Plans do not work. On-site thinking and creativity work. You go there, you assess the situation, and then if you need to plan, you only plan for the day. Making a plan ahead of time for 3 weeks does not work, will not work. Okay, so how effective is the program with respect to the organization's goals and mission? Maybe from the perspective of the organization that had sent us there, this was not their primary agenda. The agenda was to serve the community. Now, when we say serve the community, to my memory, if I remember correctly, that was not very clearly detailed. So we just had to serve the community. The community said we need to be served this way. So we said, okay, here is our service. So we were adaptable. Who likes the program? The kids loved us. The children in that orphanage loved us because we were just sitting and playing with them. And we adapted what we had planned to do to their needs. So they were happy. They could do their work. So the overall output was great, and that fed into our reports. So that is how we did things. Okay. Interpretivism and constructivism. These approaches seek to address the interests and honor the experiences of stakeholders closest to the programs evaluated, namely program staff and beneficiaries, by giving voice to their contextualized program understanding. So when we evaluate programs from the interpretivist perspective, we try and understand how the stakeholders are interpreting, how they are feeling, what they are feeling about the program. The one before this was the practical applicability. Who is happy? Now we are saying we are just trying to find out how these people are feeling. Primary values promoted: pluralism, understanding, contextualism, personal experience. So what are we trying to promote? We say, okay, within a particular context, one thing that may not work in one context will work in another context, because the demands of different contexts are different. Key audiences are program directors, staff and beneficiaries. We are trying to see things from different perspectives. We are trying to understand what is going on, why it is going on, and we are trying to evaluate the programs from their perspective. May not necessarily be immediately beneficial. Is it solving old problems? Is it giving us something new to think about? Is it distracting us from our current problems so that we get some respite while we get a break from trying to solve problems and then go back to those problems? What is this program doing? Preferred methods are qualitative. Now we are getting somewhere. The methods in this are qualitative: case studies, open-ended interviews and observations, document reviews and dialectics. We are only trying to find out what is happening. So we go into the community and we try and talk to people. We try and understand what they felt. So this is qualitative completely. Typical evaluation question is: how is the program experienced by various stakeholders? In what ways is the program meaningful? And that is where qualitative research comes in. We try and get this descriptive data, we come back, we analyze it, and we say, within this context, this is what made sense. Within that context, that is what made sense. There may not be a very simple formula to understand a cause and effect relationship in this situation, but this is really helping the community. So that's where qualitative explanations will come in. Okay, critical social sciences are openly ideological, that explicitly advance a particular value agenda, for example, social justice, empowerment, critical race consciousness, or social change. The rationales for evaluation are the advocacy of ideals and values and the answering of certain program questions. Advancing an activist ideology with grounding in a constructivist philosophy. We are trying to look at everything from an ideological point of view. The primary values promoted are emancipation, empowerment, social change, egalitarianism, critical enlightenment. We look at everything from a very, 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 very focused, very powerful microscope. We put everything under a very powerful microscope and we see, okay, is this really contributing to this, or can we see something else which is not really visible? So we critically evaluate, ideologically evaluate from the point of view of what a program should do in the long run. When we talk about ideology, we are talking about the higher goals. So key audiences here are program beneficiaries and their communities, the activists. Preferred methods are participatory, action-oriented, stakeholder participation in evaluation agenda, in the evaluation agenda setting, data collection, interpretation, action. These are the methods. So this is purely qualitative, and the evaluation questions are: in what ways are the premises, goals or activities of the program serving to maintain power and resource inequalities in the context? When we talk about critical theory, we are talking about identifying inequalities and addressing them, and that is precisely what such program evaluations do. Are we able to identify those? So we break up, we try and first decide how, with what idea in mind are we evaluating this? What are we going to do with this evaluation? How are we going to use it? And that will help us determine the paradigm from which we approach our evaluation, and then that will help us find out what kinds of tools we use for evaluation, who is going to be benefited, etc. The logic of justification for evaluations conducted qualitatively. Constructivism. Constructivist inquirers seek to understand contextualized meaning, to understand the meaningfulness of human actions and interactions as experienced and construed by the actors in a given context. So we are talking about contextual understanding of meanings. We try and present the meanings in a contextualized manner. Constructivism is the emotional, linguistic, symbolic, interactive, political dimensions of the social world. We've already talked about constructivism, and their meaningfulness or lack thereof are all constructed by agentic human actors. These constructions are influenced by specific historical, geopolitical and cultural practices and discourses, and by the intentions, noble and otherwise, of those doing the constructing. So these constructions are multiple and plural, contingent and contextual. We look at them within the context. I'm not going to go through it because we've discussed these terms ad nauseum. The task of the constructivist social inquirer. Just a second, let me see how much is left. Okay, we'll probably have to let it spill over. Okay. So maybe we can stop this discussion here at critical social sciences. That's all we have time for today in this lecture. We will discuss the rest of it in the next lecture. Thank you very much for listening.